So during the course of this weekend, I created a clone of LeetCode, as the name implies. If my voice is sounding a bit down, it is because this is like my fifth time of recording this, and the last time I did, I mistakenly deleted it. So bear with me. So yeah, how did I get here? I recently got into systems design, and I designed LeetCode on a particular day, and so there's a portion of the design where you have to talk about how to handle running users' codes, like code that people submit, and you don't want to run that directly on a machine. You want to run that inside of a Docker container where you can set memory limits, time limits, permissions on the container. So yeah, when I read that and like designed that, I kind of did not really understand the full picture, so I wanted to like solidify the knowledge. So I decided to build my own version. So if you're familiar with LeetCode, you know that there are like two popular errors: time limit exceeded and memory limit exceeded. So I tried to catch those errors. So if I submit this solution now, which is actually going to an API that's running locally, you get time limit exceeded. And if I try to do that for the MLE code as well, which is for memory limit exceeded. So here you have an array and you keep pushing ones into the array inside of an infinite loop. So you get memory limit exceeded. And then finally, for the actual solution of the two-sum question, which is what we're trying to solve, in case I didn't mention that earlier. So yeah, submit that, and then you pass 18 out of 18 test cases. Good. I don't want to make this video too long, so I would explain the backend inside of another video. So yeah, now let's start talking about the backend. So I have a JSON file where I store the test cases and the answers. So in this case, we only have one question, two-sum question, and as you can see, we have an array of test cases, and each of those each of the test objects has a the test input and the answer you're supposed to get. So let me open the side by side. If I go back to the app.js, so yeah, when the call to the API is made, this is the end. Did I say endpoint? Jesus, this is the endpoints that we are hitting. So the code that we get from the user, we use it to generate the question content, which is basically this. So the user's code goes into this place, and you have the compare res function to compare the results of the user's code and the answer that they're supposed to get. And then here we are basically looping through the test cases for each test. The question name, we are passing that in here, which is two-sum. So we're calling the question, we're calling the function, and we're passing in the arguments, which for the two-sum question is the norms array and the targets, which are these two here. So you have the array here, and then you have the target here. So I'm just spreading this test array inside of here, so that the first argument becomes the norms array and the second one is the targets. And so when we're done with the call, we compare the results. If the results match, we increase pass count, and then at the end, I log out you passed pass count test cases. This is why you saw you passed 18 out of 18 test cases. And yeah, so the actual part of the main reason why we're here, which is for how Docker is handling all of that. So when I generate the question content, I write it into this run.js file, and then I spin up a Docker container using this exec call here. The Docker container is named dummy because we are spinning up a new container for every time you want to run a question. In the real world, you probably want to have multiple containers running, and then you would run the code, like you leave the containers running, and then when a user's code comes in, you just pick one of those available containers and like run the code. But just keep things simple here. You run the container here, and I set a memory limit of 50 megabytes. I used the Node Alpine image, and yeah, to keep the container running, I had to call the shell. So yeah, that is that for that. And then here I'm just copying the run.js So just so you guys can see what it looks like, this is what it looks like. This is the code that I wrote on the clients. This is the compares function. Then you have your test cases. I know it looks mumbled up, but the compiler doesn't really care, so I don't really care. So we copy that run the JS file inside of the container, the inside /app/data inside of the container, and then we try and execute the command node/app/data/run.js inside of the container, which is basically running the code. And so we get like an std out from the runner process, which basically gives us the output that we got from running that, and then I return that output, which is what I'm returning to the client. That's why you saw you passed 18 out of 18 test cases. But now let's talk about the errors. So for the memory limit exceeded, when the memory limit goes past 50 MB, Docker automatically kills the container. Now when Docker kills the container, when Docker kills the container, this process is going to be stopped like abruptly. And when it stops, it's going to stop with an error code of 137. At least that's how Docker stops it. I didn't really go into the details of like how and why it has the error code of 137. What I read was that it has to do with memory. I'm not too sure, so I don't want to say too much on that. But yeah, when it exits with the error code of 137, you can send this error, memory limit exceeded, to show that the memory limit got exceeded. But for the timeout, how I'm handling that is, from the moment I create the Docker container, I call set timeout function and I pass in a callback that runs after 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, we are basically checking if the runner process still exists. So as you can see here, when the call to our run.js file is done and I get like the standard output, I'm trying to kill the Docker container here, and when I kill the Docker container, I'm also setting the runner process to null. So if this does not happen, like if the runner process still has a value, which I set here, that means this container is not done running. That means the container is still running. So if the container is still running and we've hit our 5-second limit, then we want to shut it down. So we have to kill the runner process first before we kill the dummy, which is the container. And I'm killing it with a code of sigint, and I don't know how this is pronounced. Sigint, I don't know. I'll just call it sigint. And so here I'm just checking if the signal is sigint, then we can send the time limit exceeded error to the user, because that's probably what happened. Again, if you want to do this in production, there are probably a lot more things you have to check for. I don't think this is the best way to handle these error codes, because you can have more errors that can like happen, and you would also want to make this like fault tolerant, because if this Docker container dies or something happens to your there are so many things you probably want to look out for if you're actually going to do this in production. So there might even be better ways to go about doing this than using Docker containers. I don't know, but yeah, that is that, and thank you.